I know that recently in Uganda, last month and in October, a small newspaper published names and addresses and photos of Ugandans who are allegedly gay, and it published a big banner that said, "Hang them." If your bill passes, should police use that information to go hunt these people down and arrest them?
I know that paper, the Rolling Stone, and I think these are young people who are also concerned on the huge problem that we have in our country. They are people who are frustrated by lack of a clear and specific law that can address this problem. And once the law passes, we would expect that the enforcement agencies would do their part to implement the clauses of the law. But this is a bill, Rachel. It's being discussed in the Parliament. We expect proposals from all over the corners of the world, and it's debated through a democratic process in a democratic country. It's a Ugandan bill meant for Ugandans to protect the children of Uganda.
But let me ask you about that, though. One other provision in the bill that I think is very interesting is that if Ugandans who are gay go anywhere else in the world, they go to any other country, and they commit something that is an offense under your bill, so they have sexual relations in another country, your bill provides that they should be extradited from that other country back to Uganda to face prosecution. That implies that you are trying to eradicate homosexuality not just in Uganda, but anywhere else that it might exist in the world. Is that your goal?
We are proposing this for Ugandans, and within the constitution and the legal framework of our country. It has nothing to do with Americans, has nothing to do with other people of the world, because Uganda is a sovereign state. It respects other sovereign states.
But somebody who was visiting here on a visa like you have from Uganda, who engaged in a consensual relations here in Washington, D.C., where you are, or in New York City, where I am, you would expect the United States government to extradite that person to Uganda to face prosecution for that relationship in the threat of life imprisonment. You think the United States government should do that as respect for Uganda?
That can well happen in countries where we have working protocols that can admit that. Where it cannot, then it will not happen. But I think the bottom line, Rachel, is to make sure that we protect the children. That's the bottom line we're looking at, to defend the tradition of family in Uganda.
How do gay people hurt the traditional family in Uganda? The existence of gay people living in Uganda, having relationships with one another, how does that hurt your family, for example?
It hurts my family when my child goes to school and is converted into gay in a practice that it is not acceptable in our society. It distorts the course of family. It hurts my family. It hurts the family of Uganda when the purpose of creation is undermined.
Sir, when you say that homosexuals are recruiting children to be gay, you say that you have evidence for this. We've not
I do have abundant evidence.
Okay, we would happily post anything that you've got online if you've got it. I have never seen evidence of this.
And I can give you enough evidence through your email.
Okay. And American Psychological Association, which would be the appropriate medical authorities looking into this, completely deny and defy the idea that anything like that has ever happened. They describe this as a myth that has been used to hurt gay people that is not based in fact. Does that give you any pause at all in asserting that as grounds for putting people in prison for life for being gay?
You know, we respect America, we respect the views from America, but I think we have our own views and our own mechanism to find out what affects our citizens in Uganda. Homosexuality is not a way of life that we accept in our country. It's not part of our culture. It's not part of God's law. And this is Uganda.
What is God's law about homosexuality in your view?
God's law is that homosexuality is sin.
Punishable by?
God's law is that homosexuality is sin. And God's law says that all authority comes from him, and we should also consider what belongs to Caesar. We also know that it is also consistent. This bill is consistent with the preachings of a son of a Jewish carpenter.
So, to be clear, you're telling me you're sort of going halfway there, and I'm asking you to explain your full view on this because this is clearly what's motivating you, and I'm trying to figure out your ultimate aim here.
Yes.
In your view, God's law is that homosexuality is a sin. In your view, does God's law prescribe an appropriate punishment for that sin?
God's law is always clear that the wages of sin is death. Whether that is implemented through a legislation like mine or by a mechanism of a human being, whatever happens is the end result that we need to turn to God if we have sinned. I'm not involved in a hate campaign. I'm not involved in something of that nature that you are trying to describe. I'm involved in providing a framework to protect our children and make sure that everybody has an input in this bill. This is a proposal. Some of the ideas can be dropped. Some of them can be accepted. Others can be adjusted. But the spirit of the bill is what we need to look at. We need to look at the problem of recruitment, the problem of promotion, and the problem of care for the victims.
To be clear, again, sir, I didn't say that you were hateful, nor did I say that you were part of a campaign of hate, nor did I compare you to Hitler, nor did I compare you to Saddam Hussein, nor did I compare you to Idi Amin. You have raised all of those things yourself, and I have not said any of them, and I don't want you to put words in my mouth here. The reason that you're on this show and the reason that you have become famous is because you are promoting life imprisonment for all gay people in your country, and your country has a lot of gay people who do not want to be subject to life in prison, and I think the international community is trying to decide whether or not Uganda is going to become an international pariah, a rogue state excluded from the community of nations because you are singling out a minority among your population for treatment that, frankly, is not the direction that the rest of the world is going. And that is all that I'm trying to do. I'm not accusing you of anything, sir. I'm trying to figure out where you're coming from.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, let me ask you one last thing. On tomorrow's show, that one last thing. What David Bahati sees as the level of material support and encouragement he gets for his international anti-gay crusade, and how it links to his membership in The Family, the secretive religious group that operates the C Street House in Washington, D.C., where lots of congressmen live. Also, we waited all day by the inbox expecting that evidence he promised of kids in school being paid American money to become gay. Still hasn't arrived. Totally checking the junk mail filters right now. We'll be right back. Last night on this show, we aired part one of my interview with the man who authored and introduced legislation known by its cute nickname, the Kill the Gays Bill. This is a bill that exists in a foreign country. This is not an American bill or an American proposal. The reason the story of this bill has become American news is that the guy proposing it, the man who authored it and is lobbying for it around the world, including here, is a political product in many ways of the secretive religious group known as The Family. The Family operates the C Street House, where a number of members of Congress live in Washington, and which has been tied to a number of recent Republican sex scandals. The Family, also known as The Fellowship, has an extensive international network that in part identifies and trains and supports and promotes the careers of guys like David Bahati, the man who authored the Kill the Gays bill. According to Jeff Charlotte, who has done more than the lion's share of the reporting on this subject, Mr. Bahati is himself a member of The Family, very well connected with very influential members of The Family who are politicians in the United States, and he is the leader for The Family in his own country's parliament. For his latest book, which is called C Street, Jeff Charlotte traveled to Uganda to investigate that connection. He says in the book, quote, "When I asked David Bahati if there was any connection between the Fellowship or The Family in Uganda and his legislation, he seemed puzzled by the question. I do not know what you mean, connection," he said. "There's no connection. They are the same thing. The bill is the Fellowship. It was our idea." The Kill the Gays bill and the American-backed version of The Family in Uganda, he says, are the same thing. In just a moment, Jeff Charlotte will tell us the importance of what Mr. Bahati admitted to me. But first, here's the close of my interview with David Bahati, including what he said when I asked him directly about his visits to America and C Street and The Family.
Homosexuality is not a way of life that we accept in our country. It's not part of our culture. It's not part of God's law. And And this is Uganda.
What is God's law about homosexuality?
God's law is that homosexuality is sin.
Punishable by?
God's law is that homosexuality is sin.
In your view, does God's law prescribe an appropriate punishment for that sin?
God's law is always clear that the wages of sin is death. Whether that is implemented through a legislation like mine or by a mechanism of a human being, whatever happens is the end result that we need to turn to God if we have sinned.
All right, let me ask you one last thing. Are you part of the fellowship, the group known as the Family here in the United States?
It is true that I've attended National Prayer Breakfast here for 2 times, and we have friends in the fellowship. We have a fellowship in Uganda that's associated with the fellowship in Washington.
I understand that you first publicly floated the idea for this bill at an event associated with the Ugandan National Prayer Breakfast. Has anybody from the fellowship or the Family in the United States encouraged you to drop the bill?
I know some people have different views in the fellowship about this bill. There are people who oppose it, but we have said this Uganda is Uganda. This legislation is for Uganda, not for America, and therefore it's not right for Americans to interfere with a process that is democratic in a democratic parliament. So there's no one who has discouraged me and no one who has encouraged me.
Are you staying with a member of the Family while you're here in the United States? You're
no.
not? Are you staying with a man named Jack Clank?
Yeah.
Is Jack Clank a former federal education official in the United States?
I think the purpose why we're on this show is to talk about the bill. It's not talk about a person I know in America. I know so many people.
So you don't have any comment on whether or not Jack Clank is a former senior official in the Department of Education under the Bush administration? That's
really not my my purpose here to talk about Jack. My purpose is to talk about the bill. Jack is a friend, is a friend, and I have so many friends in America, but all these people are not associated with the bill. They have nothing to do with the bill. It's just an opinion that I have, which can be accepted by Parliament. It can be dropped. It can be amended. It's something that our population require, and it has really nothing to do with anybody in America. And we do respect the opinions of Americans. We respect the opinions of the international community. And as we move towards passing of this bill, you will see all these views come into the bill. And at the end of the day, we shall have a wonderful piece of legislation that protects the future of our children, works within international law, that reflects the spirit of tolerance and respect for one another and understanding for one another.
It is more than your opinion, sir. It is proposed legislation to subject to life imprisonment or possibly execution a relatively significant portion of the population. Okay, life imprisonment, even if you take the execution part of it out, to subject to life imprisonment a relatively significant portion of the population of your country. Because of that, it's more than your opinion. It is the thing that has made you internationally famous, and it may be the thing ultimately that results in you being charged with crimes against humanity in some sort of international tribunal. If that happens, sir, I wish you luck in your defense, but I don't expect it'll go far.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Mr. David Bahati, a member of the Ugandan Parliament. We'll be right back.